Welcome to the 2-hour content engine course. I'm Ryan Richardson. If you don't know me, I've been a travel photographer for the last decade. I've traveled the world shooting for some of the biggest brands in the world. We're talking about Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. I've been featured National Geographic, Discovery Channel, BBC, just to name a few. And now I work with founders. I work with business owners. I've utilized a lot of what I've learned throughout the years, creating content for some of the biggest brands, partnering with some of the biggest chief marketing officers. And I've taken a lot of their secrets and what's worked for them, and I've put it into this small course where we're going to cover everything that you need to create 30 pieces of content, 30 pieces of organic videos that you can use for your business. So if you are a founder, business owner, entrepreneur, and you have a business on the back end and you're realizing that in 2025, you need to create content, guys, the reality is we live in a day and age with the internet and with social media that if you are not creating content as a business owner, you don't exist. And I don't want that for you. I want to give you the tools so that you can grow this brand, grow your brand as quickly as possible with as least friction as possible. And I want to show you how that's done, how you can do that as simply as possible, downloading my 10 years of experience and hopefully getting as much of that as you can, as much of that value, and fast track that for your own success ASAP. So we're going to talk about everything from aligning your brand. By the way, this is everything that I go through with my clients I'm onboarding. So I'm not just teaching this stuff. This is stuff that I'm actually doing currently every single day. I have a service-based business where we help founders just like you create what we're talking about. And I basically have a done for you service where I do all of this every single day for founders so that they can just focus on their business. So we're going to talk about the 3 different kind of stages of growth when it comes to content, what founders can do to leverage their content so that they don't have to focus so much. What a lot of people are starting to realize is that they're basically like a media company first and a fill in the blank company second. And that's kind of the way that it is in 2025 because there's just so much noise out there. And so we're going to talk about how to cut through that noise. So this is going to be a 3-part series. And in the first module, we're going to talk about aligning your brand. This is the most important part because people don't, if you basically are getting a bunch of attention and you're just bringing people over to your brand, you could be marketing in reverse. And what I mean by that is if you're getting attention and you're bringing people to your landing page, to your social media profile, to whatever your links are in your bio, if you don't have a lead magnet, if you do and it's bad, whatever the case is, if you're getting a bunch of attention and your content is doing its job, but you don't have your brand alignment, you don't have your brand journey figured out, you don't have your brand messaging figured out, you don't have your brand stories figured out, then you can be basically marketing in reverse, which means that it's not even just like a net zero activity for you. It could actually be a negative thing for you. And again, we don't want that. So we always start with aligning the brand first because the brand and the backbone and the clarity is the most important part. I literally won't go in and shoot videos for clients unless we go over this. And a lot of people think that they have their brand dialed and figured out. And I've worked with a lot of brands. I've worked with over 100 founders. I've worked, like I said, I've worked all over the world. So we're talking about 5 different continents. I've never sat down with a founder, a business owner, an entrepreneur who actually has their brand figured out. And that's why we start with brand alignment. In the second module, we're going to talk about actually growing your brand. So we're going to cover everything from customer awareness, which is the most important thing, because that's actually going to structure in reverse how we want to be creating content, what we're talking about, and how we're structuring it so that people actually pay attention. After that, we're going to talk about on-camera presence, which is one of the most important things because if you show up on camera and you have no energy, you don't have the proper optics, and you don't have confidence, then again, you can be you can be marketing in reverse. So you can be having a negative effect instead of just a net zero effect. And we don't want that. After that, we're going to be talking about communication styles. This is super interesting, something that nobody actually talks about in communication styles, which is how you show up and how you can actually produce and talk to the camera. There's 3 different ways that we can do that. We'll dive into that. But if you've ever tried to create content in the past and you've been frustrated, that's probably where the missing link is, because if you're not talking in the style that makes the most sense for you, you're just going to get frustrated. You might feel overwhelmed or even embarrassed. And again, we just don't want that. So we're going to touch base on camera presence, a very important thing. And then finally, we're going to be talking about filming systems. After that, in module 3, we're going to be talking about sharing your brand. So this is the actual activities of distributing your content, of getting your message out there, getting your content out there in front of the right people. We're going to talk about the waterfall distribution method, and that's how we basically utilize like a core pillar piece of content, break it down into like 14 sub pieces so that we're getting to more for less, because we want to leverage our activities. Again, I'm going to get into who this is for and who this isn't for, because this is really important, because this isn't just for creators or people who want to create content. I'm talking to founders, business owners, and entrepreneurs who have a business on the back end. So if this is if you're just a creator, this is a hobby, like this is not for you. We're talking about efficiency. We're talking about getting the most ROI as far as it goes with your marketing, because if you're just creating stuff for the sake of creating stuff, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're creating stuff because you have a purpose, which is to basically get new customers and to automate your selling at scale, then time is important. So you know this if you run a business. So I want to make sure that we talk about systems that are actually going to help you leverage the most from your time and your inputs and your investment, whatever that may be, into content creation, and get the most from it in the least amount of time. And that's where the waterfall distribution method comes in. And then we're going to talk about the only metrics that matter. There's so many ways of measuring things out there. There's so many analytic tools. There's so many different methods that we can use to measure performance. And I'm going to talk about the only ones that actually matter. So again, you can just streamline everything, no nonsense. You can look at the stuff that matters and you can iterate from there. And then that's the next chapter after that, is we're going to talk about actually adapting to the metrics that we see, what to do about them. Because again, there's so much stuff out there about analytics and algorithms and this, that, and whatever. And so much of it is just noise and doesn't matter. And then after that, we're going to talk about collaboration in content. So again, there's only so many ways that we can leverage our time and our efficiency here and our effectiveness. So we're going to talk about how we can use collaboration in content to get the most out of our content. And then after that, we're going to touch on something that's really important, and that's capturing 5-star testimonials. So a lot of businesses know that obviously testimonials, getting your customers to sell for you, is obviously very important. But if you're not doing it in a way that people are going to pay attention and strangers are actually going to listen to, if you're not going to captivate them, if you're not going to be able to get them to stop scrolling and pay attention, there's no point. So no one's just going to listen to a testimonial for a testimonial's sake for the most part, unless they're really on the fence of doing business with you and then they want to see if you have that authority and credibility. But for most people, you have to frame it in a way that people are going to listen. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about how we can put this all together and actually utilize it, because guys, at the end of the day, like a lot of this information's out there. I'm talking to a lot of smart people and I want to respect everyone's intelligence here. It's not as if a lot of this information is not out on the internet. What's different about this is that there's a system and there's a structure. So when you think of school, like there's a curriculum, you go from grade 1 to grade 12, and there's actually a system of evolution where you're getting the information in the right way at the right time. And the thing with the internet is that most of the stuff that's out there, it's just like, it's a lot of stuff that is helpful and useful. But if you don't have a system of how to implement it and when and where, what fits where and with what timing and cadence, it's all just kind of noise. So what I'm doing is just structuring this in a no nonsense way that you have everything that you need from start to finish. There's so much that we could talk about, and there's so much here. And as you can tell, like, this is my passion. This is what I love. I love talking about this. I love talking about the psychology behind all this. And the thing that I love the most about this is that with content and with growing your brand and sharing your brand, you get instant feedback from the marketplace. So again, thinking, if you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, you know a lot of these principles. We're just repackaging them in a way that you can actually utilize them for content now. Before we go any further, I want to talk about who this is for, even though I've obviously alluded to this. But I want to really drive this home so I don't waste anyone's time, because if this is not for you, then I want you to stop watching now, go do your thing. But I want to speak directly to the people who this is for. So this is for founders. This is for builders. This is for business owners. This is for entrepreneurs. This is not for people who want to grow a massive audience, be a creator for creator's sake. I have nothing but love for those people, and growing an audience is obviously very important. But we're kind of talking about the antithesis of a lot of these things. The whole point of this is that a lot of people and a lot of my clients that I'm working for, they're making more money with 5,000 followers and with 5,000 views on their videos than a lot of my friends who are influencers or creators who have 500,000 followers and get, 250,000 views on some of their videos. And the reason for that is obviously we'll kind of get into, but it's because we're doing all this with a purpose and with intention, and we're using the frameworks that we have here. And this is kind of a work along with a workbook that I'm going to include. You can find it somewhere on this page. At the bottom, there's going to be a link where you can download your free workbook called the 2-Hour Content Engine. And you can kind of work along with me as we go through this. This is what I'm referencing if I kind of look down. I'm looking at that workbook just for reference. Most of this is just going to be winging it, though. I don't have a script. I don't have any kind of template, so I'm going to follow outside of the workbook. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Module 1, first thing I want to talk about, we got to talk about definitions, because this is really important, because brand is something that you hear about literally all the time. It's like the big buzzword. Not a lot of people agree on terms for the word brand, though. So I want to talk about what is brand. So the way that I define it, and the way that we'll kind of be working with a working definition of it, is a brand is a story embedded in the mind of the market. Okay. So it's not what you think about your brand. It's not what your friends or your mom think about your brand. It's what your market thinks about you. Jeff Bezos has a quote saying that your brand is basically what people say about you when you're not in the room. That's associations, right? So we're talking about associations, what you want to be associated with. That's all brand is. So when we talk about branding, really important distinction. So brand, what we just talked about, branding, that is the tools and actions you tell to share and live that story. So that's where you're talking about logos, colors, fonts, distribution, which we'll get into, collaboration, like who you're collaborating with. Think of obviously classic example, Michael Jordan is Nike, Nike's Michael Jordan. So these associations become synonymous, and those are the tools that they use to basically put forth their story, right? So it's the distribution of the story of your brand. So we're going to start with the brand journey, and then it's going to go into your brand story. And then from there, we're going to talk about content. Okay. So those are kind of like the 3 levels of what we're talking about, outside of just the 3 modules that I mentioned earlier. So basically I want you guys to kind of think for a second, like what you want to get from this, because again, there's so much information out there. Maybe just write down your intention. Like this is something that I think in business is also really important too. I do this with reading all the time. It's like a hack for speed reading, actually, is to write down your intention with a book before you dive into it. And it kind of just like helps you frame everything in a way that's more memorable and actionable, right? So this is like a collaborative thing here. I'm not talking at you. Again, I'm really fortunate to be able to work with some really intelligent people. And I think what a lot of people do in the marketing space and like social media and distribution in general is like, we all know that, literacy is down. Most people try to speak at like a 3rd grade level to appeal to the most amount of people. I'm not going to do that. I respect you guys too much. You can see that even in the way that I'm going to be editing this video. I'm not trying to capture your attention like you're a goldfish and zoom in, zoom out, have like these risers. And this isn't what this is about. There's a place for that, and we'll get into that because we are talking about content. And for some of us, we are marketing to the masses, so we have to subscribe to certain things. Again, my target audience is you, so I know that I don't have to do that. There's quality in what we're talking about, and so I did kind of frame some of my experience, my background, and hopefully that buys me a little bit of credibility. I've spent a lot more time. I spent the last decade building up some of the biggest brands in the world instead of my own, because I felt as though it would be much more genuine for me to come up on here 10 years later after I've put in the work and I've got the arrows in my back and the scars that I've earned from some of the experiences and from eating shit for so long, that it gives me more confidence to be able to say what I'm saying to you because I have those stories and I have that experience to kind of pull from. So I digress. Quote I like from Ben Horowitz. If you don't know, he's a investor in the VC world, Silicon Valley. He's got a great book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And in that book, he's got a quote that says, "The mistake people make is thinking that story is just about marketing. No, the story is the strategy. If you make your story better, you make the strategy better. So really important note before we get into the brand journey. I think it's just something good to keep in mind. So talking about the brand journey, like I said, we're talking about our brand. Again, there's a distinction between brand and branding. So right now we're talking about our brand. Okay, so for background, so most people do waste a lot of time basically chasing vanity metrics. And this is the huge distinction between like a creator and someone who's creating for entertainment and just dancing on TikTok and pursuing a following more than conversions. So we have a business, right? Like we want to get leads, and we want to get leads in a way that we're not constantly just throwing money at Zuckerberg over at Meta or pay-per-clicks and giving all the guys at Google all of our money, right? Because the thing is that that's great, but content is compounding. So what's nice about content, I mean, if you think about, Hermosi's got the perfect analogy as far as the longer the runway, the bigger the ask at the end of it. So this is something that takes time. It's not an overnight fix, and it's in a really important frame that, again, anytime I sit down and I talk to clients and we're in a sales meeting or any of our sales guys, I want them to emphasize this point, and they do, is that this is not an overnight fix. And this is not going to be something that can replace ads in like 30 days. And there are cases. I've worked with a client. I had one client in particular, a lawyer. We started creating short form content for him, and he posted his first 3 videos on Instagram. And within a week and a half, he closed 3 new clients as a direct result of those videos. And keeping in mind that his LTV, lifetime value of his customers, is about $25,000 each, just because of his, obviously, his value as a lawyer. The LTV is very high. So, arguably he made $75,000 from posting 3 videos that we shot for him and using this framework, right? So I'm not saying that's impossible, that things won't take off and you won't have instant success or near instant success from following this framework. But I want to set a realistic expectation that this is the longer runway. And the good news is that it's compounding. So with ads, as soon as you stop paying Facebook, your inputs are gone, your outputs are also gone. So you're not getting anything in return. With content, once you set up a library and you have an archive of all of this value, it compounds. And it's one of those things, there's like the bamboo analogy where it's like, don't quote me on this, but it's something to the effect where like a bamboo might take whatever it is, months or years, where it's like, it doesn't grow more than like 6 inches. And then practically overnight, it just like, it shoots for the roof, right? Like it grows like 30 feet within a day or something. That's how content works. That's how it's worked for all of my clients. And I just want to set that frame that this is something, when you're thinking about business, this, like with business things, it's like the overnight 10-year success, right? That's what we're talking about. And I can't overstate how important that is. And I use this to dissuade the wrong people as well, because if people are in this for a quick fix, number one, it reflects poorly on me. So if I'm selling our done for you services for clients who are expecting these like miracle returns on doing content for 3 months, really, like we're talking about establishing digital presence in a 3-month timeline. It's going to take a year. And with content, that's kind of the frame that I think most people would be best served thinking through, is that this is going to take a while. Like it's a slog. And we know this, like we know like the big podcasts out there, Chris Williamson, like he created 400 episodes before anyone heard of him. Hermosi was creating content for 4 years before, he put out like 1 podcast a day for like 4 years straight. And then, it seemed like he was an overnight success. So I just want to frame this in the most honest way possible, because the thing is that though it's going to require a lot of time, because of everything we're going through and because you get to download my 10 years of experience and me failing and stumbling along the way, and also now being able to serve the clients that I serve and, see the success that they have. We can fast track that, but not to the point where, again, this is going to be an overnight success. So just something to keep in mind. So the objective here with the brand journey framework is to basically clarify what it is that you want from growing your brand, right? So the first question here is, what do I want most from my brand? So I like to think of it with starting with the end in mind. And again, with business, you've probably thought about this. Like, what are you trying to achieve in business, right? And then you kind of work backwards from, okay, well, what do I have to do today to make that happen? So go ahead. And again, if you haven't downloaded the workbook, I highly recommend you download it. If not, take notes. That's totally fine. But what do you want most from your brand? The thing is that not everyone has to create content or should build a brand. Everyone has a brand. Like, again, a brand is just another way to think about it is a reputation. We all have a reputation. So do you need to scale that reputation? Do you need to be in the public eye to achieve what you want with your business? If the answer isn't a resounding yes, you might not want to build a brand. And again, I don't want to dissuade people. Like, I don't want to talk anyone out of doing something. But what I want is to just be as honest and as authentic as possible. And I hope that that's coming across, because if the answer is that you want to build a brand because you want more leads, you want to make a bigger impact, you want to establish authority, or if you're just being really honest with yourself and you're like, I just want fame. I want fame in my industry. That's okay. I'm not here to judge. No one's judging, right? So just be honest. What is it that you're trying to achieve from this? Because everything we do is going to be working backwards from that. So next we have, what do I need to be known for to get it? Right? So what do I want from my brand? And what do I need to be known for to get it? Okay. So think about that for a second. This is really important. Again, there's a reason we're starting here. So after that, what do I need to do to get there? That's the third question. So this is it. I'm going to try to make this as like actionable and as useful as possible. Again, there's a million things I can talk about, and I'll do that in other videos because I'm obviously passionate about this stuff, but I'm really just making this as concise as possible for you to accomplish your goals, to establish authority in your niche, to create compelling, value-driven content for your target audience, and make an impact and do something with it, right? So I'm just trying to simplify everything here. What this does is it's going to attract your ideal customers, and we'll get a little bit more into this. This is going to position you as the go-to in your space. So whatever your industry is, we want to set you up as being the authority and the obvious choice. So this is how we get there with clarity. Clarity is the most important part. So we're going to align every single piece of content that we distribute and everything that we make moving forward has to answer to these three questions. If it doesn't answer to these three questions, we're wasting time or we're not in alignment. And being congruent throughout all of our messaging is so vital, which brings us to our next framework. So again, a quick quote before we dive into this. So, marketing without a system for managing meaning is analogous to ancient navigators trying to find port in treacherous seas on a starless night. It's from a really good branding book, actually, called The Hero and the Outlaw by Mark and Pearson. And we're going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about uncovering your brand type. So this is so important. And it's one of the things that I alluded to earlier. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that you can find and get value in, obviously. This is one area in branding that like nobody talks about. And this is where some of my unique insight is actually helpful. The reason for that is because I've seen these Fortune 500, these Fortune 100 companies, the people like the big movers, the big names in this world. This is what they're using to maximum effect. Okay, so archetypes, I could do an entire course just on this. So I don't want to just kind of like skim over it. And without getting too much into it, basically what we're talking about is the fact that there's really only 12 stories out there. There's only 12 personalities out there. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are creating our own brand in such a way that speaks to that archetype. So we want to uncover what should your brand archetype be. So when I talk about archetypes, and I'll interchange it with type just for brevity, but the world's most iconic brands succeed because they consistently embody a single clear archetype or type. Okay, so it's a timeless character rooted in psychology that connects emotionally with your audience, creating an intangible experience of meaning. So we're talking about creating meaning. And as an aside, this is why stories are so important. There's so many case studies I could talk about as to why stories are important. And it'll be a theme throughout this course that we're talking about ongoing. But there's so many examples. There was this journalist that he listed a bunch of random useless items on eBay, and he wanted to see how much money he could make from selling useless knickknacks, right? So he basically just posted them, and they were like ugly mugs, like ugly, like, you know, like a rubber duck, like just like stupid shit that nobody needs. And he listed everything. He got as much as he could. He tried to make as much money as possible as he could from posting these useless items. And then he went back, he posted the items again, knowing now what the market was willing to pay for these items on eBay. He went back and he wrote a compelling story for each of them. And he literally he actually teamed up, he collaborated with authors, with famous book writers, with screenwriters, and they all contributed, and they wrote these stories for these useless items that nobody would pay more than like $4 or $5 for on eBay. And he had something to the effect of like 7,000% increase of what people were willing to pay for these items. Like, imagine if what you're selling right now is like, this could be the missing piece. So uncovering your brand type and utilizing stories, imagine if you could get like, 7,000% is insane. Imagine you could double the worth and the value, or the perceived value of your offer, of your business, just from telling the right stories. So there's 12 archetypes based off of Jungian psychology, and the most successful brands in the world, every single Fortune 100 company I've worked with is using this, and they're using it masterfully. We're going to get into some of these examples, but it's something that's not talked about enough for how important it is in the world of branding and the world of content. And this goes back to aligning our brand message in a really big way, because this is where we're going to base everything off of, as far as how to wrap things, how to package things, like how we actually message all of our communication to our customers. This is going to uncover our customers' deepest desires. It's going to uncover their biggest fears. And why is that important? We have to motivate people to change their behavior. Even if it's just click buy, we have to motivate them to do something that's different. So how do we motivate? You can only motivate based off of either fears or desires. Understanding one of the 12, or choosing rather, uncovering your brand archetype will help you figure out exactly what your target audience's deepest desires and fears are. Think about how valuable that is. So again, people are using this to great effect. We're going to get into some of these examples, but the world's most iconic brands succeed because they consistently embody a single clear archetype or type. We'll use type interchangeably with archetype in this sense. So a timeless character rooted in psychology that connects emotionally with your audience, creating an intangible experience of meaning. So going back to what I was saying with the stories, all we're doing is we're literally embedding meaning into our products and our services. Like, this is how marketing is done. Now that people have the choice and we're buying things out of want and desire instead of out of need and necessity, someone who's selling tractors is going to sell differently. Like, John Deere markets a lot differently than us, founders and entrepreneurs, people who have online offers, coaches. Our messaging is very different. So this is critical, because anyone who's not using this is missing out, is leaving so much opportunity on the table. And they might still be using old practices that are great for selling tractors and necessities, but not things where we need to align with our customers' meaning. We need to build meaning into our products and our services, and we need to embody that meaning ourselves, right? So the 12 brand archetypes. So I've grouped them by core motivation. There's basically 4 types of core motivators that get people to do something. And again, I'm really big on definitions. So number 1, we're talking about branding now, right? Instead of brand, I was saying, it's obviously the story embedded in the mind of the market. Branding now, we're talking about the tools that actually we use to convey, embody, and share our story with others. So another word that I think is really important to talk about in this section here is motivation. So motivation, if you don't know, comes from the Latin word. I know I'm getting into like the etymology. This is important. Like, I'm not just rambling here. I'm going to tie it all together. But the etymology of the word motivation comes from the Latin word motivas. Motivas basically means something to the effect of moving with a cause, right? So a cause is basically a call to action, right? We're talking about like the hero's journey. So why do people do anything? We have a call to action. There's a story archetype in every purchase and in anything with meaning, right? So this is so important because we're basically hijacking people's motivation and their desires. So the 12 brand archetypes help you give your brand a personality, and it's something that people instantly recognize, right? It's like a constellation. We can look up at the stars and make sense of them because we go, that's the Big Dipper. And we know it's the Big Dipper because someone showed us. And then now every single time we look up, we know that organization of stars is the Big Dipper. That's how archetypes work, right? So it helps save people the task of having to think. And I don't want that to come across in a negative way, because I know so many founders and entrepreneurs are frustrated with we'll call it like the general intellect of our target audience. And people feel so frustrated because it's like, oh, I have to like market all my messages at like a 3rd grade level. And I have to like I have to simplify everything to such a point where it's just like, do I really have to be that obvious? And the answer is yes. But the reason that is not necessarily that our customers are dumb. And I have the privilege of serving very intelligent people that are making a huge impact in their builders. So I get to speak candidly to you, and I'm not too worried about, do I have to simplify it for brevity? I'm not too worried, but not everyone has that luxury, and it's not a bad thing, because all we're doing is we're reducing cognitive load. So our brains, we see up to 10,000 marketing messages a day. There's so much noise out there. So the brain is one of the most exhausting organs in our body. So it burns more calories, like per weight. It's like, it only weighs, it's less than 5% of our body weight is attributed to our brain, but it chews up like 20 to 25% of our calories throughout the day. So this is a survival mechanism that we've evolved in such a way that we have these mental shortcuts that are these 12 archetypes that we're talking about, that people understand universally across languages and around the world, because it helps us have cognitive ease. It's a survival mechanism. If we're not using this stuff, guys, you're leaving so much money on the table. And again, I can't overstate it. It's so important. So, okay, we'll get into it. So basically the 4 motivators. So we've got independence is one, belonging is another, stability is another, and mastery is another. So I'm going to dive into what that actually looks like, and the kind of the subcategories in there making up the 12, if you will. So for the innocent, we have their goal is safety and simplicity and optimism, right? So you can think of Dove and Coca-Cola. You've got the explorer archetype. Their goal is discovery, freedom, and self-direction. So we've got Jeep, Patagonia, the sage, okay? The goal of the sage, truth, wisdom, understanding. So we've got Google, Harvard. And again, this is all in the workbook. I'm going to break down the 12 archetypes so we've got motivation, the actual archetype we're talking about, the customer fear, what it achieves, and the messaging we're going to use, and then brand examples. So we'll dive into, let's go with the ruler. So you've got the ruler archetype. So their motivation is stability, right? So their biggest fear, your customer's biggest fear, if they're the ruler archetype, is instability or lack of control, right? So they're trying to achieve order and control, right? Makes sense. So our messaging, or we could build our messaging or wrap our content, package everything in a way that speaks to the common respect, right? Common respect. We've got Rolex is one that embodies this. We've got Mercedes is another one that embodies this. We'll do another one. So we've got motivated by mastery is the hero archetype. So I'm the hero archetype. Okay. So going into MBTI, which is also part of this, because MBTI, Myers-Briggs Personality Type Indicator, is influenced directly by these Jungian archetypes that we're talking about right now, right? So ESTP is the hero archetype. I'm ESTP. And again, a lot of the times your customer is you, right? So one of the easiest ways to find out which type, like uncovering your type that you should have for your brand, take an MBTI test and figure out which MBTI you are and how that corresponds to the 12 archetypes that we're talking about right now. This is such a hack. Like this is like maybe one of the most important things we're going to talk about in this course. I'll do one more. So motivated by independence, you have the innocent, right? So your customer fear, if they're the innocent, is corruption or complexity. Okay. So what they're trying to achieve is simplicity and optimism and purity, right? Messaging. Life is good. Life's pure and simple. Dove, Coca-Cola, right? It all makes sense. So they're using this, guys. They're using it to great effect. So we get to funnel hack, for all my Russell Brunson fans out there, like we get to funnel hack and we can basically work backwards from what the best brands in the world are doing. We can see how they're doing it. And I can tell you that they are doing it because I've worked with some of these chief marketing officers and they're using it. They're using it in such a powerful way. So you should too. Choose the right archetype for your brand. So step one, we're going to identify your customer's deepest motivation. So ask yourself, do they want freedom? Do they want belonging? Do they want mastery? What are they trying to achieve, right? So again, for my archetype, the hero archetype, motivated by mastery. Okay. Messaging is very clear for that. Education, right? That's why I'm making this course. That's why I have this workbook. I love teaching people and the people that I serve love to learn, right? So this is so key. Are they trying to feel safe, feel seen, feel strong? What are they trying to feel? Right? So after that, you can fill that out, take a second, pause the video if you like. After that, we have step two, right? So define your brand's role in their journey. So what's your role personally? Or what's your role as a brand, right? Are you a guide? So someone who's guiding someone, that's the sage, the magician archetype. A challenger, you've got the outlaw, the hero. A friend, everyman, lover. Leader, you've got ruler, creator. So if you're a creator and you're a leader, your messaging is going to be very different than if you're a lover, right? And your audience is going to be different. Your customer is going to respond to that messaging very differently. If you think about the difference between a Jim Beam commercial for whiskey drinkers, looks, feels a lot different than a Dove commercial, right? So very important to keep this in mind. So pick one archetype that reflects your unique way of helping them transform. So which type do you think that your brand is most aligned with? I might be talking about this and you might know immediately like, oh, I'm definitely the ruler or I'm definitely the outlaw, right? So that's going to change how you speak to people. We're going to talk about that now. So step 3, deploy the archetype across your brand. So voicing and messaging, right? Again, we're talking about branding. These are the tools. These are the ways that we're communicating our message. This is the way we're packaging things. So we're packaging in a way that if you're the hero archetype, you're bold, action-packed, sage, calm, wise, right? Yoda. I think Yoda's a sage. Jester, playful and punchy. Can't even think of a brand that has the jester archetype. But if you think about the jester personality, think about that one friend in the friend group that if there's any silence, if you're watching the game or you're having a get together and wine night, he's the friend or she's the friend who can't have silence, has to crack a joke, like always be not even the center of attention, but feels a responsibility to like uplift the mood in the room, right? So that's the jester. Actually want to pull up. So I've got a table here. So the jester, Old Spice, Eminem, right? Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So that's visual identity. So match colors, fonts, design to the archetype's personality. And then there's the content strategy. So tell stories and create posts that reinforce your archetype's core desire, right? So for example, if you're a creator, document the creative process, right? It's probably like Gary Vee, I bet, is a creator. I think he's a creator archetype. He's constantly creating things. Like he does it for the love of the game. The guy does not care about money. He's all about it for the game. If you're an outlaw, call out the outdated industry norms, throw stones. Like there's so many outlaw brands I can think of, but if you're an outlaw, like you can throw stones at things. You can say like, hey, for example, like if you're in an education space or you're teaching or coaching, you can throw stones at academia. You can throw stones. Like you can actually take hits at Harvard, right? So this informs so much of your brand strategy and so much of how you're going to deploy it through your messaging and your marketing and your content strategy. So a brand is a story always being told. That's a quote by the former Nike and Starbucks exec, Scott Bedbury. Archetypes ensure your story stays consistent, emotional, and timeless. Choose yours, lean in, and let it be your content. Let it lead your content. Let it lead your positioning and your customer connection. Moving on. So if you want to inspire people to take action, tell them a story they can see themselves in. That's by Blake Mycoskie. He's the founder of Tom's Shoes. There's a whole, if you remember the campaign where they basically was like buy one, give one away, giving shoes to people who are less privileged. And going through our kind of brand journey, brand story content, going through the evolution here in this course, we're going to talk about brand story now. Keeping in brand alignment, this is the next step. So building your brand story, the background here is your brand isn't your logo, it's your legend. So going back to the Jeff Bezos quote where your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. This is how we control the narrative, which is so important. This is association. Like you want to be remembered and known for something. And when you're not in the room, you want your content to do the talking for you. And we can only do that if we establish this with our brand and our brand story. So this is where the brand story framework comes in. So at its core, it's a powerful brand story we basically established with 3 questions. So I have these 3 questions here. So it's, what is your audience's greatest obstacle? So take some time to think about that. What is their obstacle? The next question is, how do you uniquely, the keyword being uniquely, help them overcome it, right? So this is your approach, your process, perspective that no one else offers. How do you do that? So take notes, fill this out. The third one is, what does life look like after they buy from you? So there's actually a good book called Exactly What to Say by Phil M. Jones, I believe. And he talks about if you can't paint a picture of what life looks like after someone buys from you, if they can't see themselves doing it, the chances of them taking the leap and purchasing are basically zero. So we want to actually paint a picture of what life looks like after. So there's features, there's benefits, and then there's like overall life quality outcomes. So this is what we're talking about, like bigger picture, zooming out. This is what's really important. This is what we need to be talking about to get our brand story. So altogether, we have basically the obstacle. We've got how we uniquely help them overcome it. And then we've got what life looks like after, so the outcome, right? So those are the 3 steps to building your brand story. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that, and actually it shouldn't be, because going back to cognitive ease, cognitive load, again, simplicity. But this is our core brand story. This is the most important messaging piece that we have. All of our content, everything that we produce afterwards, everything we're going to talk about later in this course is all a consequence of what our brand story is. We have to have this dialed. It's not about clever copy. It's about crafting a narrative that resonates. All right. So your brand story, you can think of it as being the center of your entire marketing and brand strategy, right? So around your brand story, you have everything from public relations to sales, to email, to advertising, to market education, to personal contact, to events. Everything else, everything that you're marketing around is around your brand story, right? After your brand story, we have your first 4 stories that you're going to tell. So we're getting closer to creating content, the fun part. So your first 4 stories, these are stories that stick, right? So there's a good book by Kendra Hall. She breaks this down. So there's 4 essential stories and story types every brand needs to master in order to connect, convert, and stand out in today's saturated market. Okay. So stories are how we connect and how we remember. They're how we make sense of the world. In business, stories aren't optional. They're your edge. It's a quote by Kendra Hall. So the 4 stories are the value story, the founder story, the purpose story, and the customer story. Okay, so the value story, the purpose, this shows what you stand for. And the use case is why your brand exists and how, right? The founder story connects emotionally. This is your backstory. This is why you do what you do, right? And what you do. Then there's the purpose story. So this aligns your business with your business activities, right? This is your vision, your change, or your movement. Then there's the customer story, right? So this provides proof and relatability because customers buy it. The thing is it's social proof, and people mimic. This is what a lot of this is all about, is that people just mimic. They mimic what they see. So social proof is one of the most important things, which is why at the end of this course, we have a section just for collecting compelling testimonials that actually convert, because it's so powerful. So most brands talk at their audience. Story-driven brands create connection. It's a big difference, big differentiator there. So these are your foundation. So I'd have a questionnaire here. We'll go through it briefly again. If you're taking notes, then you can write this down. You can pause the video, whatever's easiest. But we'll go through it briefly. So for the value story, what value do you bring to the world? And what does your brand stand for, and why does it matter? So the first question is, what problem in the world or your industry frustrates you most? There's got to be a frustration, right? That's probably why you got into what you're doing. When did you realize first that you could do something about it? When was that moment? Right? So fill that out. Next, you have share a story of a time when your solution helped someone. And then you have the summary at the end. So 1 to 2 sentences that you can use for content, right? You can make a short form piece of content out of this. This is really compelling. This is why you do what you do. Then there's the founder story, okay? So why do you do what you do, and what makes you the person for the job? So this is getting a little bit more specific. And it ties in, again, when your customer is you, oftentimes, like we talked about with the brand type, this really is compelling for people who are following you who aren't ready to purchase just yet. And you're kind of helping them evolve up you're helping them evolve closer to the point of sale, the point of purchase, right? So people talk about nurturing. We'll get into this, but people talk about nurturing. They don't know actually, like, what does that mean? This is how we do it. Stuff like this. This is so important. So the founder story is how we nurture those people. So what is a pivotal moment that led you to start this business? What was the obstacle or challenge that you had to overcome? What lesson did you learn? And how does that shape your brand today? And then a summary, 1 to 2 sentences that, again, you can use in content. So this will take some time. Like, this should be meaningful. Again, these are your core 4 stories. So after your brand story, which we just covered, second to that being the most important, this is critical for the first couple of pieces of content that we want to be setting up as a foundation. You can use this on your website. You can use this on email, trickle email when people sign up for your newsletter. There's so many different ways that you can use this in your business to really make a connection with your customer. After that, you've got the purpose story. So what greater mission or movement are you contributing to? Like, what's your overall overarching mission? So what do you believe the world, business, or industry needs more of? How does your work help move that mission forward? What kind of future are you trying to help build? And then again, a summary that you can use for content. So after that, you've got the customer story. So how has your work changed someone's life? What was the customer situation before they worked with you? What transformation did they experience? What does life look like now? And then a summary again. So we covered a lot in this first video. Again, we went from everything from establishing clarity in your brand so that you're working backwards with the end in mind. And then you've got your brand journey framework now figured out. So you know exactly what that looks like and that everything moving forward is consistent and congruent with that journey. And then we set up we've uncovered your type. So your customers' motivation, their fears. That's going to inform all of your messaging. It's going to inform how your brand looks. It's going to inform a lot of things. And then we got into your brand story. And then we covered the 4 first stories that you want to tell moving forward. So we covered a lot. So in the next video and the next part of this course, we're going to talk about growing your brand. So we're going to talk about content, but it's not as simple as just creating content, which is why, again, if I'm getting hired by a founder, a business leader, we're going to go through everything that we just went through to establish what you just established, because there's no point in growing our brand or making content until we have clarity in those areas. And the same could be said about growing your brand, because we're going to get into our customer, our ideal customer profile, but we're going to talk about it in a way that people aren't talking about it. That's much more important than demographics and age, material status, whether they're married or not, or how much money they make. Like, everyone gets this stuff wrong. We're going to get into that in the next video. And we're going to cover more than just that. So again, we're moving with our brand alignment. We're going from brand journey, brand story to our content finally in the next part. We're going to talk about customer awareness. We're going to talk about what to talk about when we're creating content. So we're going to talk about what I call the signal pyramid, which is going to inform exactly like what we say and what we talk about, like I said. And then we're going to talk about how to actually structure your content so that people listen using frameworks that are proven for success. This is frameworks that I've stolen straight up from some of the Fortune 100 companies I've worked with in the past. I've seen them used to great effect, and I've created content for them using those frameworks. And I'm going to tell you about that. We're going to talk about showing up on camera with presence, right? How we show up is really important. And then we're going to talk about finding your communication style. After that, we're going to talk about actually filming. We're going to talk about filming systems so we can reduce friction. We can save a lot of time. And there's a lot of value here. So I hope that you got something from this video. I hope that you have a lot more clarity now with your brand. I hope that you're more motivated now than ever, now that you have that clarity. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. We're going to cover a lot, and we're making our way through this. And congratulations on getting closer to growing your brand and creating a digital presence and creating content that's actually going to convert and make a difference in your business and make a difference in your life. So we'll see you in the next video.